the United America already on a part number 4 over here in this special series. We've already seen the earlier years. Remember, the United States of America doesn't really go back, many more than thousands of years like some of the other countries we've spoken about. But obviously, the massive population in of itself. So to encapsulate some of the highlights of the country, we very much need to divide this up into many, many parts in this series. Now we're talking around the period between 1930 till the end of the Second World War time period, maybe till the 1950s. And the next part we're going to progress on more as we're going to go deep inside. This might be another 3 or 4 parts easily at the moment. Because there's so much to gain ground, but we're making fantastic progress at the moment. So let's go to the 1930s. While we know that earlier Jewish elements from Germany were business-oriented and, let's say, voted as conservative Republicans over here, we're going to speak a bit, actually, just to start off over here, about the politics in America. What was it like at that stage in time? Who was voting for example? What was the American community like? So we know that they voted in general, the German Jews, when they came in as conservative Republicans. A wave, let's say, of Eastern European Jews starting in 1880s, when at that point in time, which we spoke about, became, let's say, were more liberal or left-wing and became the political majority. This was in the 1880s. Many came to America with experience, let's just say, in socialist and in, let's say, anarchist movements, as well as the Bund, let's say, for example, which was based in Eastern Europe. Many Jewish people will rise to various different prominent positions in the early 20th century, especially among the American labor movement. And that will help found unions and the needle trades, for example, clothing industry, will play a huge role, let's say, in the CIO and in the Democratic Party of politics. Someone named Sidney Hillman, he's a key figure of the CIO he happens to have been of. He was very powerful in the early 1940s, let's say at a national level, let's say, respectively. So what did he do? By the 1930s, Jewish people were a major political power now, a factor in New York City. They had strong support for, let's say, most, liberal programs in itself of the New Deal, let's just say, in itself. That's a terminology that's used. But let's just say their leaders were excluded from the Irish-controlled Tammany Hall, for example, which was a full change, I think, in the Democratic, let's say, party in New York City. Therefore, I think they will work through third parties, such as the American Labour Party, and I think at that point in time, the Liberal Party of New York. By 1940s, they were inside the Democratic Party and helped overthrow the Tammany Hall. They continued, let's say, as a major element of the New Deal coalition, giving social support to the civil rights movement. And by the mid-1960s, which we're going to speak about maybe in the next class, the Black Power movement caused a growing, separation between blacks and Jews. Through both groups remained, let's say, solidly in the Democratic camp, the pool in of itself. So that's something that we have to point out over here. Okay, so let's continue over here. I think in Washington, 15% of the FDR's appointees were Jewish, including, I think, top positioners such as Secretary of Treasury, someone named Henry Morgenthau Jr., he's actually known as, in 1933, and Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, I think this was in the year 1939. President Roosevelt's, his programs were not designed, let's say, to overthrow capitalism, as, let's say, maybe the left-wing people wanted, but instead they were there to create economic opportunities for working class people, especially Catholics and Jewish people. In their roles, they were as voters, let us say, in the dominant New Deal coalition and as union members. Now, President Roosevelt's coalition was very delicate, that he could not afford to let ethnic and racial tensions tear it apart. He had deliberate policy, was not publicly criticized atrocities developing in Nazi Germany, for example, nor the domestic anti-Semitism typified, let's just say, at that stage in time by Catholic priests, someone named Charles Coughlin. I think, which, let's say, unfortunately blamed Jewish people for the Great Depression and the international crisis in Europe, respectively. I think as a result, President Roosevelt accomplished for liberal American Jews, the New Deal was a program worth fighting for, even if it meant deferring concerns about the fate of German Jews. And according, I think, to someone named Henry Feingold, it was a welfare state aspect of the New Deal rather than Roosevelt's foreign policy, which attracted the Jewish voter. The war and the Holocaust tended to reinforce the left-wing political sentiments of many, let us say, Jewish voters at that point in time. And I think come what the 1930s, it was increasing anti-Semitism was in the United States, and this would lead to restrictions of Jewish American life for elite circles at that stage in time. So you can see very much just the history. Where anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. And if you're tuning in live, please subscribe to our channel as we're exploring the history of the Jewish community of the United States of America, part number 4, over here on this series. So we know that in the 1930s there was increasing anti-Semitism in the USA, and this would lead to restrictions on Jewish life from elite circles. That restrictions was mostly informal and affected, let's say, Jewish presence in universities, professors, and high-end housing communities, I believe. Many of the restrictions originated in the 1920s, but will become popularized, as I say, and became more practiced, especially throughout the 1930s. And obviously there was due to increasing anti-Semitism climate over there, respectively, which was very, very, very problematic at that stage in time. And I think the East Coast, the Midwest, and the South, as I say, public and private universities imposed limits on the number of Jewish applicants they would accept. So you can see this is horrific over there also. Regardless of the high socialist standing, Harvard University believed that if it accepted students based only on merit, the student body would become majority Jewish over there. And for the same reason, the New Jersey College for Women, I think known as the Douglas College, only accepted 31% of Jewish applicants versus 61% of all others. Similar patterns emerged among elite professionals at that point in time, and especially communities. Law firms hired fewer Jewish people, and you can see this was a major problem at that point in time in the United States of America. Now, refugees from Nazi Germany over here. Let's talk about that period. I think it was a period in 1934 to 1943. The Congress, the Roosevelt administration, and the public opinion would express concern about the fate of Jewish people in Europe, but consistently refused to permit large-scale immigration of Jewish refugees. I think there was a report by the State Department, Undersecretary of State, someone named Stuart Eisenstadt. He would note that the United States accepted only 21,000 refugees from Europe and did not significantly raise or even fill its restrictive quotas, accepting far fewer Jews per capita than many of the neutral European countries, and fewer in absolute terms than Switzerland. So they could have done a lot more. According to someone named David Wyman, the United States and its allies were willing to attempt almost nothing to save the Jewish community over there. So you can see they had an indirect, a cause or effect on the Jewish on what happened, the horrors over there. Okay, now in St. Louis. Now the SS St. Louis called from Germany in May 1939. They carried 936 mainly German and Jewish refugees. Come on 4th of June 1939. It was also refused permission to unload on orders of President Roosevelt as the ship waited in the Caribbean Sea between Florida and Cuba. Initially, Roosevelt showed limited willingness to take in some of those on board, but the Immigration Act of 1924 made that illegal, and public opinion was strongly opposed. The ship returned to Europe. 620 of the passengers were eventually accepted in continental Europe. Of those, only 365 would end up surviving the Holocaust. You can see the horrors over here as we're exploring what actually went on during the late 1930s till 1945 over here as we're exploring the American history. Now, there was immigration restrictions. The United States had tight, let's just say, immigration policies, I think, at that stage in time, and it was not lifted during the Holocaust. Let's just say, I think there was news of which began to reach the United States in 1941 and 1942, and it has been estimated that 190,000 to 200,000 Jews could have been saved during the Second World War had it not been for bureaucratic obstacles to immigration deliberately created by the Breckinridge, Long and others. I think asylum of the European Jewish population was not a priority for the United States during the war, and the American Jewish community did not realize the severity, let's say, of the Holocaust until late in the conflict. This is in part because the Nazis did not allow Jews to leave occupied Europe or Germany during this time period itself, respectively. So that's very, very interesting. We're just exploring the horrors of what went on in the Holocaust and how America didn't really help so much at that point in time. Let's talk a bit about the American Jewish response to the Holocaust. Over here, I'm just using Wikipedia as a source. So anyone tuning in live at the moment, please subscribe to the channel and join our community over here as we're exploring history of various different countries. Now, during the Second World War period, the American Jewish community was, let's say, at that point in time, there was divisions over there and was unable to form, let's say, a common front. Most Eastern European Jews favoured Zionism, which sought a return to the homeland as the only solution. This, let's say, had the effect of diverting attention from the horrors of what went on in Nazi Germany. Now, German Jews were alarmed at the Nazis, but were disdainful of Zionism. Also, I think proponents of the Jewish state and Jewish army agitated, but I think at that point in time, many leaders were so fearful of, let's say, an anti-Semitic backlash inside the United States of America that they demanded that all the Jewish people keep a low public profile. One important development was a sudden conversion of most, but not all, Jewish leaders to Zionism late in the war. So that was a pivotal time period, let's just say, in itself. Now, let's say the Holocaust was, as we said before, largely ignored by American media as it was happening. Why that was is illuminated by anti-Zionistic position taken by someone named Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times during the Second World War, committed to classical Reform Judaism, which defined Judaism as religious faith and not as people. I think Sulzberger insisted that as an American, he saw European Jews as part of a refugee problem, not separate from it. You can see terrible guidance of it. As publisher of the nation's most influential newspaper, the New York Times, he permitted only a handful of editorials during the war on the extermination of the Jews. He supported the anti-Zionist American Council for Judaism, even after it became known that the Nazis had singled out the Jews for destruction. Sulzberger held that all refugees had suffered. He opposed the creation of Israel in itself, and in effect he muted the enormous, let's just say, political influence by the Times by keeping issues of concern regarding Jews off the editorial page and burying the stories. You can see how terrible it was. His judgment and what he actually did. He didn't really publicize Nazi atrocities against the Jewish communities, against the Jews, and in short items deep inside the paper he just put it. In time he grew increasingly out of step with the American, let's say, Jewish community, and by his, let's say, persistent refusal to recognize Jewish people as a people, and despite obvious flaws in his view of American democracy over here. So, now I think while Jews owned few prestigious newspapers other than New York Times, he had major presence at that stage in time in the network radio, for example. Hollywood films and radio, with few exceptions, avoided questioning Nazi persecution of Europe's Jews prior to Pearl Harbor. Jewish studio executives did not want to be accused of advocating Jewish propaganda by making films with overtly, let's say, anti-fascist themes. Indeed, they were pressured by such organizations as Anti-Defamation League and by national Jewish leaders to avoid such themes, lest, let's say, American Jewish people suffer like an anti-Semitic backlash over here. Okay. Despite there was strong, let's say, public and political sentiment to the country, there were some who encouraged the United States government to help victims of this genocide by the evil Nazis. In 1943, and just before Yom Kippur, 400, the vast majority of Orthodox rabbis, would march in Washington to draw attention to the plight of Holocaust victims. A week later, Senator William Warren Barber, he would draw attention to the plight of Holocaust victims. Yeah, and I think this Senator William Warren Barber, in New Jersey, one of a handful of politicians who met with the rabbis on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, proposed legislation that would have allowed as many as 100,000 victims of the Holocaust to immigrate temporarily to the United States. Now, Barber died 6 weeks after introducing the bill, and it was not passed at the end. The parallel bill was introduced in the House of Representatives by Representative Samuel Dickstein, and this also failed to pass at the time. During the Holocaust, fewer than 30,000 Jews a year reached United States of America, and some were turned away due to immigration policies. The US did not change its immigration policies until 1948. As of 2021, laws requiring teaching of the Holocaust are on the books in 16 US states, so it should really be in all the states, in my opinion. Over here, you can see the atrocities that actually went on over there. Now, the impact, let's just say, what did it have on American Jewry? The Holocaust had a profound impact on the community in the United States, especially after the 1960s, as the Jewish people tried to comprehend what had actually happened over there, and especially commemorate and grapple with it when looking to the future. Someone named Abraham Joshua Heschel will summarize this dilemma, and when he attempts to understand Auschwitz, he tries to answer like commit a supreme blasphemy. Israel enables us to bear the agony of Auschwitz without radical despair, to sense a ray of God's radiance in the jungles of history. Let's talk a bit about post-war over here. Post-war, after 500,000 American Jews, or half of the eligible men, fought in World War II, and after the war, younger families joined the new trend of urbanization. Now, there, Jewish people became increasingly, let's just say, at that point in time, assimilated and demonstrated rising, let's just say at that point in time, intermarriage at that window of time. The suburbs facilitated the formation of new centres. At Jewish school enrollment more than doubled between the end of World War II and the mid-1950s. And synagogue affiliation would jump from 20% in 1930 to 60% in 1960. The fastest growth that reports about will come in reform, I think, and conservative congregations at that point in time. And having never been subjugated, let's just say, to the Holocaust, the United States stood after the Second World War as the largest, richest, and healthiest center of Judaism in the world. Smaller Jewish communities turned increasingly to American Jewry for guidance and support. That's something I had to. Immediately after the Second World War, some Jewish refugees resettled in the United States, and another wave of Jewish refugees, especially from Arab nations, settled in the USA after expulsion from their home countries over there. Now let's talk a bit more about the politics over there at that point in time. Who were they voting for before we start speaking about the various rabbis? Now, American Jews voted 90% against the Republicans and supported Democrats, Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman in elections of 1940 and 1944 and 1948. Despite both party platforms supporting the creation of a Jewish state in the latter, two elections. During, I think, the 1952 and 1956 elections, they voted 60 or more % for Democrats. Interesting enough. So that was basically the ins and outs of it. I think so I think it was in 1960 they would vote 83% Democrats at that stage in time. John F. Kennedy, a Catholic against Richard Nixon, happened to be. In 1964, 90% of American Jews voted for Lyndon Johnson, and his Republican opponent, Barry Goldwater, was raised, let's say, Episcopalian by his paternal grandparents, I think were Jewish, if I'm not mistaken. And Hubert Humphrey garnered 81% of the Jewish vote in the 1968 elections. But we'll speak maybe more about that in the coming videos. Now we want to speak a bit about the rabbis that were in the United States of America at that window of time. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of American Jewry, and please subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, please join us and subscribe. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers. We're a community here, and we do lots of great content over here. So yeah, so that is very, very interesting. So everyone, welcome, and let's continue. Let's speak about a few of the rabbis from the United States of America now. And the first rabbi I want to speak about is Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson. He lived between 1895 to 1975. He was a major Chabad rabbi and representative of the sixth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, to the United States during the 1920s and 1930s. He was one, let's just say, of the first Lubavitcher activists to arrive in America. He was actually born in Russia and migrated in 1925 to the USA. And he was actually born, I think, in Belarus in 1895. And he would die on the 27th of May 1975. He was about 79 years of age at the time. I think before World War II in 1925, he came to New York to help Chabad Hasidim immigrate to USA. He became a rabbi and educator and became active in various different activities involving fundraising. He's, let's say, sent funds to Rabbi Schneerson in Eastern Europe. He supported Chabad activities and enabled Rabbi Schneerson to leave, I think, Russia at that stage in time. Now, Rabbi Jacobson was a rabbi in Anshe Bobroisk Synagogue in Brownsville, in Brooklyn. He found a yeshiva called Achei Timimim in New York in 1932. This was more for young men, if I'm not mistaken, over here. So I don't know if we'll get the opportunity. So much to speak about America. I don't know if we'll be able to speak about every single yeshiva in itself. Respectively, after World War II, following the death of Rabbi Schneerson in 1950, Rabbi Jacobson became an early supporter of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who was not yet the leader at that point in time of Chabad. Interesting enough, and Robert Jacobson served on the faculty of the Central Lubavitch Yeshiva at 770 Eastern Parkway. He would help found the Yeshiva Hadar HaTorah for Baalei Teshuvah, and I think he would serve as the dean there. And he was also the dean of the Bet Rivka School for Girls also. So very interesting. And I think this Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, he was a founder of the Jewish Renewal movement. He described Robert Jacobson as my mashpia, my spiritual mentor, let's just say, and cites his teachings in a specific memoir, I believe, over. Now another famous rabbi, he passed away in 1930, who was in America also, was Rabbi Jacob Nieto. He lived between 1863, I believe he passed away on the 26th of March 1930. He was 66 years of age. He would die in San Francisco, so he was working very much in America, I believe, at windows of time. So who was he? He was a rabbi of the congregation She'erit Yisrael in San Francisco from 1893 to 1930. So he's a key figure in American Jewry. He was raised in Sephardic family in Jamaica. He was a strong leader and a central figure during almost every major crisis and cause during this near 4-decade term. He was a powerful, let's say, religious reformer. I think come 1905, he presided over the building of the new congregation She'erit Yisrael on California Street, which I think is today is a landmark historically. And I think the building remains almost unchanged since he spoke there over 100 years ago. It's interesting, he led relief efforts, especially after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and intervened in, let's say, various different issues that were grappling the area. He stood by labor organizations. Someone named Thomas Mooney, who was wrongly convicted of the anarchist bombing in 1916. He was also related to the famous Belasco family and married Reina Belasco. Interesting enough, I think he married Reina Belasco to J. Stanley Rosenthal in 1917. He was, let's say, so he did a lot. The name of his wife was Rabbanit Rose, and they had the son Frank Belasco Nieto. I think it's reported over here, very sadly, he tragically drowned in a boating accident at age of 14. and his second son, John Jacob Nieto, I think was born 6 years later, but I think he sadly passed away at the age of 21 also. Now, Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, Nieto was also a past Grand Master of District Number 4 of B'nai B'rith, and was also, let's say, a post-orator and a chaplain of the Grand Lodge of Masons of California also. So he was a key rabbi also at that point in time in America, part of She'eretz Yisrael, San Francisco, respectively. And another very famous rabbi during that specific era of time, very, very well known, was Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. We'll maybe speak about him more in the next slide. He lived between 1903 to 1993. He was a major American rabbi, a Talmudist. He was a Jewish philosopher. He was, let's say, a scion of the Lithuanian Jewish Soloveitchik rabbinic dynasty. Himself, he was Rosh Yeshiva of the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary, also known as Rietas, of Yeshiva University in New York City. And he was known, he ordained close to 2,000 rabbis over the course of almost half a century. So he's a key figure, especially in the early 1900s. Some rabbinic, and also later 1900s, some rabbinic literature, such as Sefer Shurei Hagrid, him as Hagrid, an acronym for the Gaon Rabbi Yosef Dov. That's how it's actually. He's regarded, let's just say, as a major figure in modern Orthodox Jewry, also the role model and the religious leader. Let's just say, itself. So he was actually born in, I think, Prustani in Imperial Russia. I think later, now currently is Belarus. He came from a rabbinical dynasty dating back 200 years, his whatever. Now, interesting enough, his paternal grandfather was Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, and his great-grandfather was Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Bet Halevi. His great-grandfather was Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, also popularly known as the Netziv, and his great-great-great-great-grandfather was Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. His father, Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, as I say, preceded him as the head of Rietz Rabbinical College, respectively, the school of Yeshiva University. And on his maternal line, Rabbi Soloveitchik was a grandson of Rabbi Eliyahu Feinstein, and his wife, Rabbinit Gutta Feinstein, who was also from the Davidovich family, in turn was a descendant of long line of, let's say, Kapulian rabbis, and of the, let's say, Tosafot, Yom Tov, respectively, the Shla, the Maharshal, and Rashi. Now, Rabbi Soloveitchik's mother, Rabbinit Pesha, was a first cousin of the famous Rabbi Moshe Feinstein also. So anyone joining us live over here, welcome to our community. We're exploring the history of the Jewish community of America, so please subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet, and welcome over here. Okay, early years. Now we're going to explore the early years of Rabbi Soloveitchik. He was educated at Talmud Torah, an elementary yeshiva, let's say, and had many private tutors. And he was seen as with great mental prowess just at a young age. And it's interesting, I think in 1922 he graduated from Liberal Arts Gymnasium, I believe, in Dubno. In 1924 he entered the Free Polish University, where he spent 3 years studying political science. 1926 he came to Berlin, Germany, entered the Friedrich Wilhelm University. He passed the examination, let's say, for supplementary subjects of the German Institute for Studies by Foreigners, and was then given full matriculation at the university. He studied philosophy, economics, and Hebrew subjects over there, maintaining a very rigorous schedule, an intensive, let's say, Gemara Talmudic study, respectively. He would go to Boston, I think, in 1932. Whenever we mentioned Boston much in the series, he would emigrate to America, to Boston. He referred to himself as the Soloveitchik of the Boston. They would, I believe, he was referred to. That year he opened the yeshiva known as the Heichal Rabbeinu Chaim HaLevi, or the Boston Yeshiva. Initially, it mainly served lay people and their children, but starting in 1939, was augmented, I think, by advanced studies and staff that had fled the outbreak of World War II in Europe. Now, Rabbi Soloveitchik pioneered the Maimonides School, one of the first Hebrew day schools in Boston in 1937, when the school's, let's say, high school itself was founded in late 1940s. He instituted a number of innovations in the curriculum, including teaching Gemara, let's say, to boys and girls studying in class together, involved himself in all manner of religious areas in Boston. He was at times both a rabbinical supervisor of kosher slaughtering, shechita, and an educator, gladly accepting invitations to lecture in Jewish and religious philosophy. prestigious New England colleges and universities. Rabbi Soloveitchik was the head of Boston's Council of Orthodox Synagogues, also known as a Va'ad, and his son-in-law was someone named Isidore Twersky. He was an internationally expert on the writings of Maimonides, and would succeed Harry Austrian Wolfson to Nathan Literature Chair of Jewish History and Literature at Harvard University, respectively, over that point in time. And Rabbi Soloveitchik will go to America eventually. He will succeed his father, Rabbi Moses Soloveitchik, as the head of the Rietz Rabbinical School at Yeshiva University, YU, also known as. In 1941, he would teach there until 1986. I think illness will actually keep him from continuing, and was considered top Rosh Yeshiva. He was never actually formally recognized position at YU from the time he began teaching there until his death in 1993. Let's just say itself. He ordained 2,000 rabbis, many of whom, let's say, are among leaders of Orthodox Judaism and the Jewish people today. And he was an advocate for intensive, let's say, textual Torah study, and for Jewish women, reported over, at Stern College for Women, giving the first class in Talmud, inaugurated at Stern College, and attracted many, and inspired many students worldwide, respectively. He's a key figure, let's just say, in of itself. Now, let's talk about it. Let's say other views, let's just say. He had a departure, let's just say, from the traditional Brisker view of Zionism. That's an interesting fact, let's just say, in of itself over here. Friends, anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here. Let's just say there were religious disagreements. Rabbi Soloveitchik was proud of his connections to the Soloveitchik rabbinic dynasty. He spoke fondly of his uncle, Rabbi Yitzhak Zev Soloveitchik, also known as a Brisker Rav. So his relatives and namesakes who now, let's say, lived in Jerusalem, where he had established his own branch of the Brisker Yeshiva. He was respected for the genius Talmudic scholarship, which few could challenge or disparage, despite the very differing views on Zionism. The Briskers in Jerusalem, being staunch anti-Zionists, they see the paragraph on Zionism below for a discussion of Soloveitchik's Zionistic viewpoint. Let's say there was research by someone named Shlomo Pick. He indicates that his father, Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, maintained a close relationship with the religious Zionist movement, especially Mizrahi circles, in Warsaw, prior to his father's departure from Yeshiva University and the son's departure from the University of Berlin, respectively. Let's explore. He had a relation with Agudat Yisrael also. I think after he would leave Agudat Yisrael, the organization's leadership was mostly quiet when it came to public statements, let's say, involving Rabbi Soloveitchik, let's say. I think Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was Rabbi Soloveitchik's cousin, and would have a very warm and profoundly respectful relations with him, and would correspond, especially on the eve of every Jewish holiday, has to be pointed over. Okay, this is interesting. Let's speak about the Maimonides school, because Maimonides school will become a key school in America, respectively, over all throughout history. So let's speak a bit about that. Anyone, if you're tuning in live, please subscribe to our channel. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers, so welcome to our community. Okay. Let's say a few words about Maimonides School, now a key school in America. I think it's also known as Yeshivat Rambam. It's a co-educational, modern Orthodox Jewish day school located, I think, in various different places in Brookline, Massachusetts. The school was founded actually in 1937 by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik and his wife, Rabbinit Tonya Soloveitchik. And it's named after Rabbi Moses Maimonides, respectively. Now, let's talk about today. Today, I believe, Maimonides is a Torah institution in current day with approximately 550 students from early childhood, 2 to 4 years old, through grade 12, with over 2,000 alumni, including multiple Rhodes Scholars, National Merit Scholars, let's say prominent professors, scientists, business leaders. More than 325 of them currently are living in Israel at the current time, interesting enough in of itself. I believe they have, it was actually established, I believe, in 1937. This school was the Saville campus. I think it's actually named after someone named Morris Saville, who was a long-time school chairman and benefactor, respectively, over there. So that's something we have to point out of here. So he is a key figure over there. So very interesting enough. Now, Yeah, it's interesting. One of the most famous graduates of the Maimonides school was Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, who was born actually in the year 1937, and he's also a historian, I believe. And he was a graduate from that school, which his father founded in Brooklyn, who would then go to Harvard College, if I'm not mistaken. He moved to Israel, and I think we would get a PhD from Hebrew U, and write various different master theses on halacha, on the various different important Torah topics. He's known to as many as Dr. Grach, if I'm not mistaken, after his great grandfather, for who he was named, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, respectively. Over here. Now, another key rabbi in America during the early 1900s was Rabbi Shlomo over here. Who was he? He lived between 1892 to 1944. He's known also as Reb Shlomo. So who was he? He was a rabbi. He was once again a Talmudist. He was a Rosh Yeshiva, and he would lead the most prominent yeshivot in Europe and the United States of America. Now, he was born in Partish, in Belarus, Minsk, to someone named Michel Chaiman, who was also a rabbi. When he was 12 years of age, he went to yeshiva in Kamenetz to study under the famous Rabbi Baruch Ber Leibovitz, with whom he was very close. And I think in 1918 he married the daughter of Rabbi Yochanan Rudensky of Volozhin, and the brother-in-law, I believe, of Rabbi Simcha Zelik Riga of Brisk, respectively. So a very well decorated family of great rabbis. After his marriage, Rabbi Leibovitz asked Rabbi Hyman to lecture at the yeshiva in Kamenetz, which I think that point in time had been wandering from Slobodka to Kremenchuk. It was, I think, at this time that Rabbi Hyman developed a reputation of being one of, let's say, Lithuania's most outstanding students at that stage in time. And I think during World War he was briefly drafted to the Russian army. He managed to review the entire tractate of Tubot while serving on the front lines. After the war, Rabbi Hyman began to deliver Gemara classes in the Ohel Torah of Branowitz under the leadership of Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. In 1927, at the request of Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grzinski of Vilna, Rabbi Hyman became the Rosh Yeshiva of the Ramelis Yeshiva. Now, I think in 1935, he was invited to the United States of America, to New York, by Rabbi Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz, in order for him to come and lead the Mitzvah Torah B'Da'at. With Rav Grudzinski's approval, Rabbi Hyman accepted this position, thereby being spared the horrors of the Holocaust. And during Rabbi Hyman's tenure at Torah B'Da'at, the yeshiva experienced a period of great growth. He was confronted, let us say, with what was considered to be the ardent secularism of America, which would threaten, let's say, to smother any vestige of ultra-Orthodox way of life. Rabbi Hyman once remarked that one whose children do not pursue the path of Torah can compensate by teaching Torah to the children of others. That was his thing. He passed away in 1944. He was 52 years of age, and I think was succeeded in the Ramelis Yeshiva by Rabbi Yisrael Zev Gusman, and I think in Torah Vodat, Rabbi Reuben Grosovsky, respectively, over there. He was also a writer. Also, we have to point out. Okay, friends, let's speak a bit about another key American Rabbi Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz. He was born in 1886. He passed away in 1948. He was a leader of American Orthodox Judaism and founder of institutions, including Torah or Masorah, let's say outreach and educational organizations. In 1921, he would become the principal of Yeshivat Torah B'Da'at, an early Brooklyn-based yeshiva at that point in time, which was founded in 1918. And he would add a high school and a postgraduate program to yeshiva, and his policies were informed by the Orthodox philosophical movement Torah im Derech Eretz, let's just say in of itself. Now, friends, we are speaking mostly, a vast majority of rabbis that we're going to talk about over here are Orthodox rabbis. We're trying to really, despite being a historical class, we are really concentrating on that today. Now, Rabbi Mendelowitz had a very, let's just say, decorative career in itself, respectively. He was born in an area called Village, I believe. You can take it. Yeah. Okay. So he was born, I believe, in Village, which is, I think, in Slovakia in modern day, also known as Svetlis, in the Austria-Hungarian Empire at that point in time. It was a small town near the border of Poland. So let's say to a Hasidic family he was actually born to. It was actually interesting. Moshe and Batsheva Mendelowitz Rabbi Shraga Feivel pronounced his family name Mendelovich, apparently, and his mother died when he was only 10. He was 12 when the family relocated to an area called Mezoloborok, which is, and he would study, I believe, with Reb Aaron, the Dayan of Mezolaboroitz. Well, let's say consider him his top pupil. He would receive, I think, his smicha only at 17 years of age, and would continue his studies, I think, under Rabbi Simcha Bunim Schreiber, another great rabbi. He was the author of the Shevet Sofer and the grandson of the Chatam Sofer. And throughout his life, let's just say, he refused to use the title of rabbi and insisted on being referred to as Mr. Mendeloitz. Very interesting enough. And at age 22, he married, so very, very interesting. He would get married to Rabbanit Bluma Rachel in the town of Huminer in Slovakia, and began to study several not well-known Jewish writings, including the works of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, famous rabbi. I hope we will speak about one second time. Very, very interesting. So he was really into that. He would do great amounts of activities, let's say. He sought positions in Germany, I believe, and the United States of America. He had intention, let's say, of disseminating knowledge of Judaism to Jewish people previously unexposed to their heritage. I think September 1913, he arrived alone in Philadelphia. He lived in Scranton, Pennsylvania, for 7 years, teaching the local Talmud Torah afternoon program in Jewish studies. In 1920, he was able to bring his family from Hungary and settle in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. I think he would join forces with Chazan Yosele Rosenblatt, famous Chazan, in 1923. They would produce a Yiddish, a Dos Yiddische Licht. It was short-lived, let's say, English and Yiddish language, a weekly that included articles of comment and inspiration, and will eventually become a daily, but was, let's say, forced to discontinue publication in 1927 because of financial difficulties. In fact, Rosenblatt went on a year-long concert tour to pay back the monies owed to creditors. Now, the founding members of Yeshivat Torah V'Da'at soon offered him the principalship of the institution. They would start, I think, off as an elementary school, and Rabbi Mendelowitz, let's say, soon added a second yeshiva high school in America. The first being the Talmudic Academy, associated with Yeshiva College, founded in 1916. The yeshiva opened its Metivta in 1926, and then under Rabbi Mendelowitz's direction, another early development in America, but also in competition with, let's say, Yeshiva College, a postgraduate program. Rabbi Mendelowitz first appointed Rabbi Gedalia Shaw to the faculty of the yeshiva, later became its principal and Rosh Yeshiva, respectively. Over there, let's speak about Yeshivat Torah V'Da'at, very famous yeshiva, also known as Yeshiva and Metivta Torah V'Da'at, or the Torah V'Da'at Rabbinical Seminary. It's a yeshiva in Flatbush, in the neighborhood of Brooklyn. Let's explore a bit of the history within regards to it. I think it was actually conceived in 1970 and formally opened in 1918 by Benjamin Wilhelm and Louis Dershowitz to provide a yeshiva education to the children of families then moving, let's say, from the Lower East Side to the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. Let's say the two friends, Rabbi Zev Gold of the local congregation, the congregation Beit Jacob and Shei Shalom, would form a board and establish yeshiva on Kiep Street in Williamsburg as an elementary school, and the yeshiva would later move to a new building at 206 Wilson Street, and I believe remained there until 1967, while the elementary school remained at 206 Wilson Street until 1917. Now, the school was named after yeshiva founded in Leida in 1905 by someone named Rabbi Yitzhak Yaakov Reins, which combined, I think, secular studies with Jewish studies and traditional Talmud study, if I'm not mistaken. And during this period, I think the yeshiva was modeled after those in Europe, with religious studies taught in Yiddish and Talmud taught in the style of European yeshivot. Now, Rabbi Shraga Feivel Mendowitz would head the yeshiva between 1922 to 1948. In Metivta, Yeshiva High School was opened in 1926, and Rabbi David Leibovitz, obviously the great Torah scholar of Europe, would head the yeshiva's Beit Midrash from 1929, but would leave, I think, several years after to start his own yeshiva, if I'm not mistaken. Over there. Now, I think in 1935, Rabbi Shlomo Heyman, who we mentioned before, became the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, a position he held until 1944, respectively. Over there, so that's very interesting. That's interesting. After Rabbi Mendelowitz died in 1948, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and Rabbi Raphael Ruben Grozovsky would go on to become the Rosh Yeshivot over there. The yeshiva, I think, expanded to include Beit Midrash in Monsey, an elementary school division in nearby Marine Park, and 2 summer camps. I believe the student body from nursery to postgraduate Kollel numbered 2,000 students in 2012. Absolute phenomenal amount, let's just say, in of its own right. So that's that's very interesting. So yeah, so this yeshiva has had great Rosh Yeshivas, including Rabbi Shlomo Feivel Mendelovitz, Rabbi Yisrael Belsky, Rabbi Avram Yaakov Palm, another great Rabbi Shlomo Hyman, Rabbi Dov Leibovitz, Yaakov Kemen, Rabbi Yaakov Kanetsky, Rabbi Shachner Son, Rabbi Zelik Epstein, Rabbi Gedal Yeshua, Rabbi Eliach Hazan, Reuven Fine, really, really great rabbis of great caliber. And there's many notable alumni. Let's speak about the famous Congregation Beit Jacob Ohet Shalom, another key synagogue, let's just say, in America. It's an Orthodox Jewish synagogue on Rodney Street in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's an Ashkenazic synagogue that was founded in 1969 by German Jews, this Orthodox breakaway from an existing Reform congregation. It's the oldest Orthodox congregation on Long Island, including Brooklyn and Queens, and one of the last remaining non-Hasidic Jewish institutions in Williamsburg. So it's a key place. I think the congregation constructed its first building on Kiap Street in 1870. It would merge with the Chevra Anshe Shalom and took the name Congregation Bet Jacob Anshe Shalom. Interesting. And in the 1950s, Brooklyn, the building was expropriated, let's just say, and demolished to make way for the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, and the congregation combined with another congregation in a similar situation, and in 1957 as Congregation Bet Jacob of Shalom. Interesting enough. So Robert Joshua Fishman, I think, was a rabbi from 1971 to 2023. Let's just say that's a very long time, point in time in of itself. So it was founded in 1869. In 1870, Bet Jacob will purchase a 23-foot by 95-foot lot of what is now in Keep Street, the 10th Street. Very interesting enough. And originally, I think services were held on Shabbat and Jewish holidays. The first, I believe, spiritual leader of the synagogue was Rabbi Dresser, and he was succeeded by Rabbi Louis Lewinsky, or Levinsky, you could say. So very, very interesting. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community as we are exploring the history of America, United States of America, Jewish history. Now, a famous place was Bet Midrash Govoa over here. High House of Learning, as we say in English. It's also known as a Lakewood Yeshiva or BMG. It's an ultra-Orthodox Jewish, let's say, Lithuanian yeshiva in Lakewood Township, New Jersey. It was founded by a famous rabbi, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, I believe in 1948, and it's the second largest yeshiva in the world after the famous Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem. As of 2025, this year, it had over 9,000 students between, let's say, yeshiva students and married members and married with kollel status, respectively. And the principal of the Rosh Yeshiva itself since 1982 is Rabbi Malkiel Kotler. Interesting enough. So many groups of chaburot, let's just say themselves. Many people doing great learning over there. I think the Rosh Yeshivas, the deans of the yeshivot, include Rabbi Yerucham Olshin, Rabbi David Shustal, Rabbi Malkiel Kotler, and Rabbi Yisrael Newman, also respectively. So very, very famous. I think it was established as a kollel in the White Plains, originally in New York in the early days, let's just state. And then I think by Rabbi Natan Meir Wuchtvogel, Rabbi Shmuel Schechter, and Rabbi Herschel Genoa. They were alumni of the Kelm Talmud Torah in Lithuania. And it was established, I believe, in the spring in 1942. It was the first kollel in the United States of America and had 20 members. When Rabbi Aaron Kotler came to New York from Europe in 1943, the kollel members, let's say, asked him to lead the institution, and Rabbi Kotler agreed on the condition. Now he moved to Lakewood and expanded with the Yeshiva Gedolah, which opened with an initial enrollment of 14 students, also respectively. So that's something that we have to point out about it. And it's a successor institution to Yeshivat Etz Chaim, which was located on Slutsk, which is, I think, modern-day Belarus. That was led by Rabbi Issa Zalman Meltzer and by Rabbi Aaron Kotler, if I'm not mistaken. And it was forcibly closed by the Soviet Revolution of 1917, which banned all forms of Jewish studies, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Rabbi Kotler escaped the Nazis in 1941, came to the United States, where he opened the BMG in 1950. 1943. So he lived between 1892 to 1962. 1962. Rabbi Aaron Kotler did, and obviously he was the founder of the Bet Midrash Gavoa in Lakewood. That's the first thing we can say about him. He, I think, was buried in Har Menuchot in Jerusalem, and then he was succeeded by Rabbi Shmuel Kotler, we have to point out. And he was actually born in Aaron Pine, was born in Sislovich, I believe, near Minsk, in the Russian Empire. He was orphaned at the age of 10 and adopted by his uncle Rabbi Yitzchak Pines, a rabbinical judge in Minsk, and he would be sent to study in Krynik under the tutelage of Rabbi Zalman Sender Kahana Shavira. And then he studied, I think, in Slobodka Yeshiva in Lithuania under Rabbi Nosson Finkel and Rabbi Moshe Mordechai Evshin, where he'd gone to become known as a great scholar, we have to point out, in regards to him over here. And he would join his father-in-law, Rabbi Issa Zalman Meltzer, in running the yeshiva of Slutsk. There was an outbreak of the Second World War, so Rabbi Kotler and the yeshiva relocated to Vilna. That was, I think, major refuge of most yeshivot from occupied areas. The smaller yeshivot followed the leads. The larger ones would escape either to Japan and China. Unfortunately, they were arrested, some of them, by communists and sent to Siberia and Kazakhstan. Most of the students did not manage to escape, unfortunately were murdered by the Nazis. He was brought to America on April 10th, 1941 by the Va'ad Hatzalah, a rescue organization, and guided it during the Holocaust. At first, he settled in New York City's Upper West Side in 1949 and moved to Borough Park neighborhood in Brooklyn. And 1943 will be the time period where he would establish the famous Beit Midrash Gavoa, which we've spoken about various occasions before. By the time when he passed away in 1962, the yeshiva had 250 students, and he was succeeded by his son, Rabbi Shmuel Kotler, I believe. Very, very interesting. So he was a very great rabbi of his time. How's everything going? So that is also very interesting. So, yeah, how's everything? Yeah. I filmed with Rabbi Wiener. I went to Austin last week. You've got a number you can write somewhere? Can I give you my number and you've got a WhatsApp or not?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yes, if you can WhatsApp it, so I'm just doing a live video.
Oh, you're live?
Yeah, okay. Let's take a short break. That's it. So you could just send me a WhatsApp now, forward you those videos. So I filmed in the Center program last week.
Okay, what's your number?
Go ahead.
Oh, I already have your number.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I got you.
Send me WhatsApp?
Yeah, I'll send you WhatsApp.
Yeah, send me now. Yeah, so I'll forward you those videos. Okay, take care. Good to see you. Okay, fine. Everyone, sorry, that was just a short break over here. Well, as we're exploring the history within regards to American Jewry over here, I'm going to take a short extended break for just a minute. I'll be back in 1 minute time, friends, over here. So just wait, watch your space. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Thank you.
Don't take roof apart, it gets weird. First you have to do it side. Because they don't want to do two sides. I mean, you want something? We're in the back. Right. So if you have a break for the back? No, it doesn't. I look for it, I already have it. I'm going to do all black feathers, you know. We do it is a small piece.
I just have to hide something.
First of all, I like to take this apart.
Okay, everyone, thanks for waiting and holding on as we're continuing exploring the history of the Jewish community of the United States of America here on this special edition over here, friends. So everyone, welcome to our community. And we spoke about Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer. He lived between 1870 to 1953. He was also Rosh Yeshiva and a posek, known as the Eben HaEzel, after the title of his commentary, let's say, on the Rambam's Mishneh Torah, respectively. He was a key rabbi. He passed away in Jerusalem. He was 83 years of age, and he was a Rosh Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva of Etz Chaim Yeshiva. And remember, the Etz Chaim Yeshiva would be modeled, I think, from the Bet Midrash Gavoa, Lakewood, I think, would be modeled after it, respectively. Let's speak about Yeshiva University now, YU, another important place. It's a private Orthodox Jewish university with 4 campuses in New York City, New York, the United States. University's undergraduate school, Yeshiva College, Stern College for Women, Katz School of Science and Health, and the Sims School of Business, offer a dual curriculum inspired, let's just say, by more modern, centrist Orthodox Judaism's hashkafa philosophy of Torah Umada, Torah and secular knowledge, which synthesizes, let's say, a secular academic education with the study of Torah, respectively. Now, I think it was established in 1886. It was 139 years ago. It does. I think as many, very, very interesting place in themselves. I think the majority of students at the university identify as modern Orthodox. I think Hillel International estimates that nearly all of the university's undergraduate staffs students are Jewish, while most of the graduate students, very not, So Yeshiva University is an independent institution characterized by New York State, and it's accredited by the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Its roots are actually in the YU are in Etz Chaim Yeshiva, founded in 1886 on the Lower East Side, Manhattan, a Cheder style, let's just say, elementary school founded by Eastern European immigrants that offers study of Talmud along with some secular education. Very interesting enough. So maybe we'll speak about the YU in the next class more. Let's just say, who is a key figure of Yeshiva College of YU is someone named Rabbi Bernard Rebbe. He lived between 1885 to December the 2nd, 1940, which actually a couple of days ago marked 85 years since he passed away. He served as the first president of Yeshiva College from 1915 till 1940 when he passed away. And the Bernard Rebbe Graduate School of Jewish Studies at Yeshiva University, as well as the former Yeshiva Dov Rebbe of Forest Hills, are named after him. He was born in Prinay, I think it's a neighboring, let's say, town, I believe, of Tunis. It was then part of the Russian Empire, now in Lithuania. He was the son of the community's Rabbi Nachum Shraga Rebbe. His father was his first teacher. And Nachum Rebbe passed away in 1896. He was buried next to his close friend, Rabbi Yitzhak Elchanan Spector, who would study in Telz Yeshiva, attending lectures of the Rosh Yeshiva at the time, Rabbi Yosef Leib Bloch. He was taught by the renowned Rabbi Yitzhak Blazer, another great rabbi, and learned, I think, in the Kovno Kollel, most respectively, if I'm not mistaken. In the United States, he would enroll to New York Koreatz Yeshiva. He would receive a Master of Arts degree from New York University in 1909. One of America's senior rabbis and president of the Union of Orthodox Rabbis, someone named Rabbi Bernard Leventhal of Philadelphia, visited the yeshiva and would discuss various Gemara topics with new students and invite him to come to Philadelphia as a rabbi secretary and assistant. Now, Rabbi Rebbe accepted the post and will familiarize himself, let's say, with a milieu of American Jewry. At the same time, he would begin attending law school in Philadelphia, but would decide that the law was not calling. In 1911, he earned a doctorate in philosophy from Dropsy College, the first graduate of the school. Very interesting enough. So I think in November 1908, he was introduced, let's just say, to his future wife, Rabbinite Sarah Travis from Ohio. They would get married in 1909. Interesting enough. I think his wife's family were actually from a wealthy Oklahoma oilman family, let's just say himself. And he would move to Oklahoma to join the family business while, I think, finishing his doctorate. And very, very interesting enough. His main occupation, though, will be study of Torah in of itself. So that's very interesting. Let's speak about the Union of Orthodox Rabbis in America. It's actually known as the Union of Orthodox Rabbis of the United States and Canada, respectively. It's also known as Agudat Rabbanim, and it was established in the year 1901 in the US, and is the oldest, let's say, organization of Orthodox rabbis in USA. It has been for many years the principal group for such rabbis. though I think in more recent years, it lost, let's say, its former membership and influence. It was formed in 1902. It's a more strictly traditionalist agenda. Its founders were concerned with the Americanized, let's just say, cultured character of even the relatively traditional wing of local Jewry, exemplified by, let's just say, by the Orthodox Union over there. That's what we have to point out, which had formed 5 years earlier the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, which was an Orthodox institute at the time. Obviously, it would veer off. There were two distinct groups within. There were two distinct groups within the American Orthodox Rabbinate: the Eastern European and the Western European, and American-born, let's say. The Americans were English speakers, let's say, had a secular education, and competed, let's say, with reform and conservative movements from the heart of modern American Jew. Whereas European transplants were often Yiddish-speaking, barely much English skills, let's just say, and trained exclusively in rabbinics, and will be termed, let's say, ultra-Orthodox today, particularly. Though there were American scholars trained in the European path, European schools that supported secular scholarship, most rabbis belonged to either one camp or the other. That's something that we have to point out over here. Let's say to the Eastern Europeans, OU and its latter affiliated Rabbinical College of America, Council of America, were, let's say, accommodanist and lacking in scholarship and piety, they would be stating over there, whereas their credentials were rarely recognized. And the Eastern Europeans needed a fellowship to promote their ideas and raise political capital, and Agudat HaRabbanim served that need. Now, the URO leadership was willing to tolerate OU in urgent needs such as kashrut supervision. The Agudat HaRabbanim initially started raising standards in New York and elsewhere, but they had trouble, let's say, getting butchers and shochtim in line. There was someone named Rabbi Henry Pereira Mendes and his colleagues in OU would provide assistance, I think, in this specific area, respectively, we have to point out. Among the main founding rabbis of the Agudat HaRabbanim were Rabbi Bernard Leventhal, Rabbi Moshe Zvulun Margulis, also known as Ramaz, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael Shapiro, and I think Rabbi Margulis was from Europe and equally at ease in Yiddish and English. He really was close to both camps, as they say. Among the well-known leaders from Agudat HaRabbanim's past include Rabbi Yaakov David Wilowski, Rabbi Eliezer Silver, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. The organization was under the direction of Rabbi Simcha Elberg from 1917 until 1995. Then Rabbi Tzvi Meir Ginsburg until he passed away. Let's say something about Rabbi Moshe Margulis. He was also another key figure in the early 1900s. He was Russian-born American Orthodox rabbi who would serve as a congregation Kehillat Yeshurun on Upper East Side, he did, of the New York City, let's say, brought on of Manhattan. And the New York Times itself will actually describe Rabbi Margulis as the Dean of Orthodox Rabbis in New York, a Zionist leader and a Jewish educator. That's how he will be described as. Now let's speak about his American career more. He came to Boston, I think, in 1889 to serve as a chief rabbi for that city's Orthodox Jewish community, and he held that position for 7 years. He would then come to New York City in 1906, serve as a rabbi of Congregation Kehillat Yeshurun, which was one of the largest and most influential Orthodox synagogue in the country at that point in time. He was one of the founders of the Union of Orthodox Rabbis, Agudat HaRabbanim, and served as the organization's honorary president. I think as part of the anti-Nazi boycott of 1933. Rabbi Margulis rose from, let's say, his sickbed to address the overflow crowd at Madison Square Garden on March 27, 1933, bringing a crowd of 20,000 to its feet with tefillot prayers that the anti-Semitic persecution cease and the hearts of Israel's enemies should be softened. Let's speak about Congregation Kehillat Yeshurun, one of the famous synagogues, a modern Orthodox Jewish synagogue on East 85th Street and Upper East Side Manhattan, New York. The synagogue was founded in 1872 and it's affiliated with the Ramaz School. The lowest school is a modern Orthodox synagogue. The lowest school in an adjacent building and is across the street from middle school, I believe. It was founded in 1872 and was originally known as Anshe Yeshurun. It was, I think, the synagogue building itself maybe were erected in 1902, and Rabbi Margulis served as rabbi from 1906 to 1936. and interesting enough, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan. They would serve to counterbalance each other. Interesting enough, the Ramaz school name derives from Rabbi Margulis's initials. He was a grandfather-in-law of the school's founder, Rabbi Joseph Lukstein, who succeeded Rabbi Margulis as synagogue senior rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. It's actually interesting, Rabbi Lukstein had served as congregation's assistant rabbi. After receiving ordination, I believe, from the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary at Yeshiva University, assumed many congregational leader roles in the years. Before his grandfather's death, Rabbi Margulis, I think, had a prolonged illness. Now, Rabbi Lukstein would assume the title of senior rabbi after his grandfather died. Now, there was also Rabbi Heskel Lukstein. Who was he? He was, I think, the son of Rabbi Joseph Lukstein, and was installed as assistant rabbi on June the 14th in 1958, if I'm not mistaken. Very interesting enough. And Rabbi Eli Weinstock became another leader of the congregation, if I'm not mistaken. That's very interesting. We've got a few more minutes, so let's speak a bit about let's conclude speaking about some of the Sephardic communities. The Syrian Jewish community of the United States of America would be mostly founded, let's just say, at the early parts of the 20th century. The largest communities, I think, are Brooklyn, Deal, New Jersey, Manhattan, Miami. If I'm not mistaken, I think in 2007, the population of New York and New Jersey communities was estimated to be as many as 90,000 people. That's absolutely phenomenal. I think the first Syrian Jews arrived in the United States with Jacob Dweck and Ezra Sit, both of Aleppo. They sailed from Liverpool in England on July the 22nd, 1892, on the Germania, after the start of the 20th century. Most immigrants came to the US for three reasons. What were they? More immigrants came. Okay, why? Economic decline in Syria will cripple their ability to earn a living. Secondly, the Young Turks, a rebel group responsible for the overthrow of the Ottoman Sultan, were conscripting Jews into the army. And third thing, the rise of Zionism led to increased anti-Semitism in Middle Eastern region. Most settled on the lower east side of Manhattan. Later settlements were in Bensonhurst, Midwood, and also Flatbush, I believe, and all along Ocean Parkway in Gravesend, in Brooklyn. The latter, let's say, is considered to be the current center of the community. And I think the community was formerly centered around the Magen David Synagogue on 67th Street. And we're going to speak about it, maybe the synagogue next class. There's also Congregation Shai Tzion, another one, on Ocean Parkway, which we should have to mention, really. And housing several synagogues in a single building, along with, I believe, a sept house, also as an additional annex structure. It's the largest and now considered the flagship synagogue of the community. The synagogue was constructed in 1960 in the Gravesend neighborhood, and the community soon followed it there throughout the rest of the 1960s, 1970s. Now we're going to speak about that in due course over here, which is very interesting. I think immigration to New York really will begin in 1907 of the Syrian community, and the Syrian Jewish community in New York originally consists of two groups: Jewish people from Aleppo and Jews from Damascus. At first, the convergence of the two groups was not, let's say, so easy. The Aleppian Jews, or the Halabis, thought themselves, let's say, more superior, let's just say, largely due to its history in Syria as a center of Jewish learning. They followed the traditions of Aaron Sova, respectively. The Damascus Jews, or the Shammais, prayed in different houses of worship. Although the two groups lived side by side, they socialized and intermarried, we have to point out, also, which is very, very interesting. Now, I think after living on the Lower East Side in the 1920s, the Syrian Jews began moving to Bensonhurst, a Brooklyn neighborhood, where they would establish a cemetery. Firstly, I think in Queens, and then in Staten Island, they would establish two synagogues over there, a Talmud Torah, and a ritual bath, a mikveh. The Damascene Jews prayed at Ahi Ezer synagogue, led by Rabbi Murad Maslaton, while Aleppian Jews would pray at Magen David synagogue. With few exceptions, such as staying in the south, the families, obviously, nearly the vast majority will follow Orthodox Jewish religion, following Jewish law and traditions and values, let's just say, Sephardic, let's just say, Syrian tradition, obviously, naturally. They are respectful of their elders and of their family values. And 1930, great Talmud Chacham from Jerusalem, I believe, would, a very interesting a descendant of an unbroken chain of rabbis dating back to the year 1600, was hired as the community's chief rabbi, which was a phenomenal, let's just say, feat in of its own right, and a massive boost to the community. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think at that point in time there was around that specific area there was assimilation into society, especially in the forms of dresses, languages, and basic education. And I think. But at the same time, I think they were able to preserve their heritage, values, and cultures as they had it in Syria, respectively. That's something that we definitely have to point out over there. Now, the community not only lived together, they vacationed together. I think they still do in modern day, which is very interesting. As the winter months ended, some vacations, as for example in Bradley Beach along New Jersey, became a commonplace, as to say, and it became a popular social scene where young boys and girls could meet a suitable spouse. So this was a form of shidduch, I think. And the Syrian Jews would make their moves in 1940s and 50s, when the wealthiest members purchased homes at Ocean Parkway and a section of Brooklyn. In just a few years, the entire community abandoned Bensonhurst and became clustered around Ocean Parkway, which was later clubbed by Syrian Jewish author Joseph Sutton, the Aleppo in Flatbush, and the Shari Tzion congregation, an architecturally magnificent building with a domed sanctuary on Ocean Parkway between avenues T and U. It was built to accommodate the growing community, and the community, let's just say, continues to use the 67th Street Synagogue for funerals and Shabbat services, also respectively. That's something we'll have to point out over here. Let's speak about Rabbi Jacob Kassin, one of the great rabbis of Syrian Jewish history. He was born actually in 1900 from a large rabbinic dynasty that spanned over 5 generations of Syrian rabbis. As a young boy, he attended the Yeshivat Ohel Moed Yeshiva in Jerusalem, which was the forerunner of Yeshivat Porat Yosef. By the age of 16, Rav Kassin was already known in Jerusalem because he had a grand Jewish knowledge of Talmud. Now, I think, sadly, I think he was an orphan by the age of 18. Both of his parents passed away, I think. It's reported over here using Shari Tzion website, actually over here. Times have become difficult, and I think there was difficulties over there. Rav Kassin developed some health problems, which would cause him problem for many years. But he would continue to focus and excel in study in Torah and Kabbalah. And then I think he had good fortune of he would get married to Rabbanit Mazal Hadaya. She happened to be Rabbanit Mazal, the daughter of the famous Mekubal, Rabbi Shalom Hodaya. Was a great rabbi. With someone we spoke about him before. Now his fortunes, let's say, he'll become a teacher at famous Yeshivat Porat Yosef, and would be living quite next to the yeshiva, and would be teaching Torah, Kabbalah late into the night, and would write various different Torah books, let's say, especially in Kabbalah itself. He would serve as a Dayan, 1920s, of the Supreme Bet Din, the Great Bet Din Court of the Sephardic community in Jerusalem. He was also able to publish numerous books on Kabbalah, on Ora Lebana, for example, Yisod HaEmunah, Pri Etz Hagen, as well as many others. His reputation was so great, and I think come with the year 1932, he was asked to travel to the United States of America to raise funds at that point in time for the Sephardic Orphanage of Jerusalem. And when he was in America, he would make a large impact on the Syrian community in Brooklyn. He would spend 6 months there, and we'll end up, that would be the fronting, let's say, time period where he's actually eventually going to become the rabbi for many years of the community and really shape the community himself. And Rabbi Kassin would accept the offer after, I think, some months of thinking of the chief rabbi of the Syrian community in Brooklyn. In 1933, he would arrive with his wife and 4 young children and would start working tirelessly, strengthening the Talmud Torah, the synagogue, the Ma'oz Lebyon, and every other organization at the time. And it was extremely instrumental in creating key institutions such as Magen David Yeshiva, the Sephardic Center, and many more. It was calculated that over his tenure as chief rabbi, over 40 new institutions was established over here. And anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community, and please subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe and join us. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers over here. And we're speaking about Rav Kassin over here. Aside from his heavy responsibility as rabbi of the community, he would devote his entire life to guiding and uplifting every member of his community spiritually and morally. He had a tolerance, let's just say, to self-sacrifice. He had an exemplary character, pleasant disposition. He had love, respect, confidence from every community member. He presided, of course, over thousands of events such as weddings, brit milah, bar mitzvah, funerals. He even personally interviewed and counseled over 2,000 engaged couples over there, which is absolutely phenomenal, let's just say, at that point in time. Now, it's interesting, Rav Shaul Kassin was not a key rabbi. He was born in Jerusalem in 1921. His father was Chief Rabbi Yaakov Kassin, and obviously Rabbanit Mazal Kassin, respectively. He also was a great rabbi. He would become a head also and learn in yeshivot. I think he actually received his rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University. He would get married to Rabbanit Freida Suruya, and they would have 8 children, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And he was serving as a rabbi of the community. He taught in Magen David Yeshiva also for over 30 years. He was a secretary of the Sephardic Bet Din, the Jewish court, assisting his father on various cases as himself. So really, really did learn from his father. For many years, I think Rav Kassin and his wife taught marriage classes and Hilchot Nida to brides and grooms throughout the community, and was instrumental in construction of the first mikveh. And he had love and passion for Torah and mitzvot. Authored famously the book called The Light of Law, Community Guidelines in of itself. So that's very interesting. Now, we're going to speak about more of the rabbis, like Rabbi Baruch Ben Chaim, who was born in 1921. Hopefully, maybe in the next class or in 2 classes' time, because he lived more, let's just say, at a time period he lived more at a later time period, later window at itself. Now let's speak about Rabbi Isaac Alkali, another key rabbi. He was born actually in the year 1881. He passed away in 1978. He was a Bulgarian born Jewish person. He would serve as the chief rabbi of Serbia in Yugoslavia, as well as the leader of the American Sephardic Jews. So he's a key rabbi in American Sephardic Jewry. He actually attended the Vienna Rabbinical Seminary and would graduate from the University of Vienna in 1908. In 1909, he was appointed the chief rabbi of Belgrade and of Serbia. He would serve as its emissary of the Serbian government in 1915 to 1918, if I'm not mistaken. And he would visit America in 1918 on behalf of the Serbian Jews, if I'm not mistaken. And he founded the Rabbinical Federation of Yugoslavia in 1923 and would serve as its first president, if I'm not mistaken, and helped edit its annual, the Javreski Almana. In common 1923, King Alexander I appointed him chief rabbi of the Yugoslavia. He would attend the first Sephardi Congress in 1925, where he was elected vice president of the World Sephardi Federation. In the years prior to the Holocaust, he was a central and unifying figure for Yugoslav Jewry. In 1928, he published a study of Jews through Balkans, and in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, he received the Order of the Saint Sava in 1921. In 1932, King Alexander I appointed him to the Senate of Yugoslavia. That would make him, I believe, the only Yugoslavian Red Cross. He wrote several research studies on the history of the Jews of Serbia, also interesting enough. Now, friends, anyone joining us live, we are a community here, and we're exploring the history of Yugoslavian Jewry over here in this special edition of it. I'm just going to take a short break and another short break. So anyone that's on, wait 1 minute. I'm going to come back in a minute over here as we're going to continue this video. Very interesting.
give it a snap.
Okay, yeah, we're just going to conclude in a minute over here. We're talking about Rabbi Alkali over here. Now, I think it was in 1941, the day the Germans bombed Belgrade. Rabbi Alkali left Belgrade with his wife and daughter and would escape to Yugoslavia at that point in time. There were false reports, I think, at first, that he was killed in the bombings. And he was hunted down by the Gestapo in Yugoslavia. And at one point, I think he would hide in a cellar while his daughter told the Gestapo agents that no one was in the house. I think the Breslau radio at the time repeatedly singled him out for attack, promising listeners he would be captured. You know, you can see the terrible anti-Semitism there was at that point in time. He would manage to escape capture and made his way to Sofia, Bulgaria, only for the pro-Nazi Bulgarian government under King Boris III to find out about his arrival and order him to leave within 24 hours. I think he was able to stay longer, I think because of health reasons, and would later make his way to Istanbul, Turkey. I think he would end up in Israel afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. And it's actually interesting. He would come to the land of Israel. He was welcomed by the entire Yishuv, and he gave great support for Zionism, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a great nephew of the famous Rabbi Yehuda Hai Alkali, who was obviously a famous rabbi, let's just say, that really advocated for political Zionism, let's just say, in of itself. And would, I think, if I'm not mistaken, make arrangements with Jewish agency leaders. He would head the Sephardic community to render aid to Yugoslavia. He would travel to America, I think, in a roundabout journey through West Africa and arrive in the country by July 1942. He would arrive in America, settle in New York, and became a representative of the Yugoslav government in exile. In 1945, he helped organize a central Sephardic Jewish community of America. He served as its leader. He was the chief rabbi of all Sephardic Jews in New York. He was a spiritual head also, if I'm not mistaken, of the Sephardic communities in the United States of America. Until his leadership, the Sephardic community in America went from some scattered and stagnating congregations into a more unified and mainstream community. Involved in the founding of the WJC in 1936, he promoted its work on behalf of, let's say, persecuted European Jewry during and after the World War II, the Holocaust. He was a board member of the American Joint Distribution Committee, the B'nai B'rith, and the New York Board of Rabbis, if I'm not mistaken. He also founded, famously, the Sephardic Home for the Aged in Brooklyn. He retired as chief rabbi in 1968, and he would live in the Sephardic home. In 1970, Yeshiva University would give him a medal. In 1971, the Association of Yugoslav Jews in the US issued a souvenir journal in honor of his 90th birthday. I think, come 1910, Rabbi Alkali married Jelena from the Schaefer family, I believe in Vienna. They had one daughter, Naomi, I believe, who established Chief Rabbi Dr. Isaac Abraham and Jelena Alkali Chair in Sephardic Studies at Yeshiva Universities. Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies in 2009. Now, I think he died at the Sephardic home in 1978, to be precise, on December 29th of that year. Let's speak a bit about the New York Board of Rabbis. It's an organization of Orthodox, Reform, conservative rabbis in New York State, surrounding Connecticut and New Jersey. It was actually formed in the year 1881 with the establishment of the New York Board of Jewish Ministries, respectively. I think we included Rabbi Henry Jacobs, Kaufman Collett, Rabbi Frederick de Sola Mendez, Rabbi Abraham Pereira Mendez, Rabbi Gustav Gottheil, and they came from different branches, let's say, of Judaism, hoping to work together to foster Jewish education and advance Judaism. I think New York Board of Rabbis was formally adopted as organization's name come 1946. I think there were protests lodged against against film Oliver Twist, if I'm not mistaken, and there was various different key figures. As I said, there was someone named Rabbi Wentworth Arthur Matthew from 1892 to 1903. He was founder of the Commandment Keepers, a distinct sect of black Hebrew Israelites, if I'm not mistaken, which didn't, let's say, spread hateful rhetoric against white people and Jews, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just gonna Yeah, friends, over here, I think we're going to call it a day in a minute. We tried to cover as much as we could within regards to Jewish history over here. I think next off we're going to go more. There's so much we can speak about different famous rabbis of that specific era in of itself. We're really still in the same territory as the post-9th World War, straight afterwards. I wanted to speak a bit also about... let's just conclude. Let's speak about Rabbi Frederick de Sola Mendes. He lived between 1850 to 1927. He was a rabbi, author, and an editor. He was from a famous family himself. He was born in Jamaica and passed away in New York. He was born to a Spanish-Portuguese family. He was a son of Rabbi Abraham Herrera Mendes, a grandson of Rabbi David Aaron de Sola, a great-grandson of Rabbi Rafael Maldola, and was a brother of Rabbi Henry Pereira Mendes, also he was a famous rabbi of his time. And he would receive a degree from Jena University. He would be in England, I think, at a window of time, if I'm not mistaken, and would have the rabbinate of the Shaarei Tefillah congregation. And he was elected rabbi of the congregation and continued in position until 1920, when he retired as Rabbi Emirates, if I'm not mistaken. So he was another key rabbi, let's just say, at that point in time, Rabbi Mendes was. So in the next series, we will continue this specific topic over here, as we're trying to get a breadth of, let's just say, the entire Jewish history of, let's just say, the American Jewish history. I think it's very, very important we're doing it, and it's just absolutely phenomenal at the moment, friends. Just gonna put my clothes on as we're gonna just leave at the moment. Yes, this happens to be the fourth segment of this series at the moment. We're going really from strength to strength at the moment. So please, everyone, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, we're a community here as we're learning about history of various countries, and we've got so much great content here on this channel, so I can't recommend enough for everyone to join and to learn more and get inspired and educated. Please watch over the previous 3 parts that we have recorded over the last week. We've been doing this series for about a week now, and wishing you all a great day. It's Shabbat Shalom. It's going to be Shabbat tomorrow. So take care and be well, everyone. Thanks for watching.